Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to QI Connect, our fourth session of 2022, and our 72nd session since we began. I'm Michael Canavan, your QI Connect chair for today. QI Connect provides an opportunity for colleagues across health and social care and beyond to learn from international leaders in the fields of improvement, innovation and integration. So, welcome to QI Connect. Just some housekeeping notes to get us started. Some of you will have seen these previously. Please use the Q&A function to submit any questions for the speaker. These will need to be moderated, so it may take a minute or two for your question to show up in the live chat, and I will explain more about that in the next slide. This session will be recorded, and by taking part, we have your consent for this. However, please note that attendees cannot be seen or heard in live events, and you can stay anonymous when asking your questions if you wish. In the event of any technical difficulties, please bear with us and we'll work quickly to bring the session back as soon as we can. As I said earlier, a recording of the session will be made available, as well as any resources, and these will be made available after today's session. So a bit more about the Q&A function. On the top right hand of your screen, you should see the Q&A tab. Please use this to submit your questions for Dorothy, our speaker today. As I said, all questions are pre-moderated, so they may take a minute or two to show up in the main Q&A tab. Your questions will show up on your My Questions tab, and once approved, they will be seen and shared for everyone in the Feature tab. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can also submit any technical difficulties via the Q&A function, and one of our moderators will respond to you as quickly as they can. If you see a question that someone else has posted, you can upvote those questions, and if you like those questions that are popular will be more visible for the chair to pose to Dorothy at the Q&A section of the session. Including staff from across health and care services in Scotland, we had 5,378 participants join our sessions from 27 different countries over the last year. And since QI Connect started, we've had engagement from approximately 1,300 organisations across the world, including 89 universities and colleges. Delivering QI Connect is very much a team effort, and what an amazing team it is. I'm fortunate to work with all of these people, and I see all of the effort that goes on in the background to ensure that these sessions run smoothly. So thanks everyone, and a special thanks also to NHS Scotland National Video Conference Service, who continue to provide fantastic support for these MS Teams live events. So thank you all. Please remember to tweet today and get those brains working and the conversations going out there on Twitter. So please use the QI Connect hashtag and tag in our account also. And if you're not already following us on Twitter, please do give us a follow, and we'll strive to get the word out even further. QI Connect. So I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker today, Dorothy Armstrong. Dorothy is the lead professional advisor to the Scottish Public Service's Ombudsman and Director of DA Professional. She regularly presents seminars on the power of apology and listening and learning from feedback. Dorothy's company DA Professional supports individuals, teams and organisations to enhance communication, leadership and well-being. Dorothy is a graduate of nursing at the University of Edinburgh and is proud to have worked in the NHS as a Director in Nursing Management and Education. And in 2010, Dorothy was awarded an Honorary Doctor of Science degree from the University of Edinburgh for services to nursing. She remains in the Nursing Register and is an Honorary Nurse Consultant and Fellow of the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh. She also feels very privileged to be the Chair of Seagrove in Edinburgh, a charitable organisation providing daycare for people living with dementia. I first met Dorothy and had the pleasure of working with her a few years back when we were supporting a team of charge nurses in NHS Borders, And I still vividly remember feeling inspired and emotionally impacted by her insights and her obvious passion to ensure people are at the heart of healthcare experience, where those both giving and receiving care are valued and appreciated. So thank you very much, Dorothy, once again for taking time out of your busy schedule to present today as our guest speaker. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights again about how we might transform the negativity of errors, concerns, complaints to a culture of learning and improvement. So thank you once again, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. And it really is a privilege to be here today as part of the QI Connect programme. So thanks for thinking about me or remembering that when we met a few years back, and also thanks to the team, particularly to Holly. As Michael said, my passion for this work began with Scotland's Ombudsman probably around 11 years ago, involved in responding to complaints. But my interest really has developed through the responding and listening from our citizens, to exploring the psychology of criticism, concerns and complaints. And particularly over the past few years, I've really focused on how we can support those people on the receiving end of complaints. And just to add a little bit of context to what Michael said, you know, I think it's really important to remember that I'm sure as healthcare professionals and welcome to colleagues in social care and other professions, that I'm really proud to have served the NHS as a nurse, an educator and leader. And we really should remember the excellent care that continues to be provided. Yet sometimes we get it wrong. And I truly believe that complaints can be seen as a gift, an opportunity for learning and improvement. However, we need also to be mindful that the public are no longer out on the pavements on a Thursday night clapping for us all. And during this recovery phase, we are all working with challenge, delays and long waits, staffing issues, and now wider social concerns such as economic crisis and even global climate change. And all of this really adds to the stress, the concerns, the adversity that we all face every day. And, you know, there's no magic wand to all of this. People will continue to complain, and we can't change that. But what we can do is change the way we respond. And hence why we thought the title of Hearts and Minds was really relevant for today. So I'm just going to share my slides now. Are you sure I want to share? Yes, thank you. And let me just go to my slides here. Now, I actually can't see anything now. Michael, can you see the slides okay? Is that all right? I've lost my picture of the team.
Not just yet, Dorothy.
Okay.
Lindsay will be looking to make sure that we can see those slides if you've already shared them.
Yeah. Let me just check I've done the right thing.
Dorothy, if I would click share again, and you might need to click on the bottom.
Oh, that's it now. That's it now. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Just a wee bit of the nerves showing up. There we go.
You can now see those, Dorothy. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. So what I'd like to do in the time that we have together, and this will be a little bit of a whistle stop. Part of my work can cover, you know, the whole range of issues around this. So I'm going to just really focus on the hearts and minds around complaints, and really talk you through some of my real interest around how we respond, some of the physiology, particularly the neuroscience around this, and then thinking about, you know, what gets in the way. And throughout, I want to just, if you like, thread through some tips and tools and resources, because I would really like if each and every one of you could take something away that you can use within your own areas of practice. I think I wanted to really start by acknowledging, I kind of mentioned it briefly there in my introduction, but acknowledging how hard it is for all of us in the current recovery phase from COVID. And All of us, I'm sure, are working with the resources we have, with the positive intention to do the very best we can. And yet we are all human and we will make mistakes. Errors will happen within healthcare, and people will raise their concerns and their complaints. And that can be really difficult to be on the receiving end of. And again, as I said, there's no magic wand to all of this, but one of the things I would invite you to think about is how we might respond, how we might see complaints, feedback as that opportunity for learning, and that obviously starts with each and every one of us. And part of that is recognising when we're on the receiving end, recognising if we're struggling with some of those concerns, criticisms and complaints. And what I wanted to share as my first module really for the presentation today was a recognition of where we are and how often we can be triggered by the feedback that we receive, but also how this impacts on those people that are complaining. So this is a model from Paul Gilbert. He's an English psychologist and he's written widely on compassion. But this has been a fabulous model for me particularly over the last couple of years when I've been sharing this work. And it's that recognition that for us to be effective, for us to be working and with the performing at our best, we want to be in this safe, caring and feeling valued environment. So the lovely sort of teal coloured circle at the centre. However, as we know, it's much more common that we're working within challenge. We're all having to learn when we're out with our comfort zone. For example, here's me delivering this lecture online, and I would much rather be in the room with you all. But hey, there's also some real silver linings to this kind of opportunity for online learning. So we know when we're challenged that it can be a motivating place to be, that it can be an opportunity for learning, we can be driven. But when we move into feeling overwhelmed, when we're in this threat zone, then that's when it causes us some concerns. And I wanted to just explain a bit of that for you and touch on some of the neuroscience, because it's certainly been really helpful for me and others over this piece. So Paul Gilbert talks about these three systems, and of course, as we know, very often we're sitting within threat. And when we're there, it's a very stressful place to be. Whereas what we're really getting you to think about is how might you move from threat to drive, and from drive to feeling safe and cared for. Because when we're in the threat zone, we know that we're going into the fight, flight, freeze response when our physiology will change. And I'm going to explain a wee bit about that in a minute, but one of the most inspiring quotes for me around all of this is we know that we will respond instantly. It's an automatic response when we're under pressure. So how might we find some space when we find ourselves on the receiving end of those really challenging conversations or complaints? So this quote from Viktor Frankl I wanted to share with you. He was an Auschwitz survivor, and he talked about being able to notice and observe other human beings and how they reacted that were out with their own control. But he was able to think, right, between the stimulus and response, there is a space. Now that space might be a microsecond, it might be minutes, hours, or whatever. But in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Quite profound, but I think really helpful. So those behaviours that we find challenging will vary. And as I've said, when we go into this threat zone, we're into survival, and we have all the automatic fight, flight, freeze responses, including, as you know, the release of cortisol and adrenaline and everything that goes along with that I'm sure we're all very familiar with. And when that happens, you've got your amygdala, which are two very small almond-shaped organs within your brain. It's responsible for how we define and regulate emotion. And it's really important it's there. It allows us to respond automatically without thinking. But actually, it's so quick that sometimes we don't have that ability to stop and think and respond in a way that is going to be helpful. We reckon it's 0.07 seconds, and in that time, your executive brain or your prefrontal cortex actually switches off. So that notion of us saying, I literally can't think straight when I'm in this stress zone is absolutely correct. Whereas our thinking, our cognitive ability is much, much slower. So how might we, how does that actually happen, and what are some of the threats that we see? I was thinking too, as well as complaints, we're often also prone at the minute to social threats. So if you think about the increase in social media, about people perhaps complaining or raising concerns within social media agendas. And this is a really useful acronym from conversational intelligence, and I've included some references at the end of the presentation. And I think it's really helpful in a whole number of different situations. I believe that when people are motivated to complain, very often it's when they're under threat. Very often there's an emotional element, and I'm going to talk more about emotions in a moment. But when people are vulnerable, when they are fearful, when they feel threatened, then we have a number of responses. So it's a really nice model that may well help you to identify what are the things that you may find trigger you, and indeed these very same threats may be facing those patients, those clients, those relatives that will go on to complain. And no surprises, I'm sure that many of these are linked to the way that we communicate. The way that we manage decisions, the information that people get are often seen as threatening. And so for me, one of my biggest triggers is tone of voice. How important is it the way that people speak to us? And that inflammatory, brusque tone of voice can send us into threat mode, that rush of adrenaline that we feel. When people are hurt or humiliated, rejected or excluded, really, all of these, then very often that will be threatening to them. And if you think about recently and during COVID, for example, and we're still seeing complaints, there's a lag of the time scales. People who are complaining about issues around the amount of communication that they had, or being able to visit relatives, for example, during COVID, many of these threats come into play. People feel that they were not included in decisions, they weren't able to communicate or visit their relatives, and because of that, it became very much a kind of threat mode. In terms of anger, the A, we know that fear is often manifest when people are vulnerable, when they're uncertain, when they're unhappy, and when that links to their own mortality or that of their loved ones. And fear is often manifest as anger. And it's another topic that I'm really interested in, because often we're seeing more challenging behaviours with patients and complainants, and often it's because they're fearful, they don't know what's going on, and it's easier for them to become angry than it is to actually look at and accept some of the emotions that are going on internally. And I'm going to talk in a moment about blame, because I think that is very linked to these emotions. Again, when people think their territory or their status is threatened, then that can again put us into fight, flight, freeze mode. So what gets in the way? What are if the mind is all about our amygdala and our stress response and our threat response, how do we respond from the place internally? What gets in the way of all of that? So I wanted to just share with you my thoughts around emotions and blame, and then finish off with a few ideas, strategies, suggestions about how you might manage some of those difficult situations. So firstly, emotions. So for me, almost every complaint has an emotional element. It can be the complaint may contain content around very much more specific issues, for example, around waiting times or medications. But very often when you get underneath that issue, when you speak to a complainant, it may well be an emotional one instead. And I think if we can be more aware of that, and if we can be aware of our own emotions, then that can have a really positive impact on the way that we communicate with people. And that will also impact on our own emotional state. So that if we, you know, we all bring our whole selves to work, and we all have our own stories. And when you find yourself on the receiving end, perhaps of a complaint or a concern that relates to your own life, then that may have a trigger for you too, and you may respond in a way that is perhaps not always as helpful as it might be. So what can we, you know, what can we do about that? How can we manage that? And going back to our own, what's within our own gift? One of the things I wanted to say was what we can do is take control of our personal state. And this is a nice little model that's been developed over the last couple of years, I think initially from education, which is just a reminder that what we need to do before perhaps going into a meeting, before responding to a difficult conversation, is to just halt, to stop and think, right, how am I right now? Am I best placed to manage this? And this is all within my own control. So very, you know, some of our basic needs around when did I last stop and have a drink or something to eat? How's my emotional state? You know, you may have just come in from something, a difficult meeting prior. Are you angry or emotional? It may even be because, you know, something personal going on in your life. Are you lonely or isolated? Are you getting the support that you actually need? And are you tired or restless? We know as a nation that we are sleep deprived, and we also know that some errors will happen when we are tired, very often towards the end of a shift or during the night. So take a moment to stop and think, how am I? What is my personal state? So that's HALT. Another helpful model here is from Willa Baker, and it's a 5-step model, which I think starts really helpfully with that ability to pause and think about how am I going to respond to this, to perhaps use some of your own strategies like being able to breathe and to just notice what is the emotion happening within yourselves and the person that you are responding to. To find yourself that moment of space that we mentioned in the Viktor Frankl quote, and to work through those emotions so that you are then able to kind of hold them, if you like, to be at ease and hold them, and then acknowledge that with the complainer, but also within yourself. So the kind of thing where we would be saying, gosh, you know, thank you for raising that complaint. That sounds really difficult. What can we do to help? Not becoming overly defensive, not being threatened by what you're hearing. And that can be really difficult. This is not easy. If this was easy, we would have cracked it all. But I think it's so important that we recognise these emotions. I see a number of complaints that are responded to where it's all about the technical aspects. And of course, that's important. But we also need to acknowledge the problems with the emotions, with the triggering points. And I think we're okay for time. Let me just share this very short video with you. It's from the wonderful Brené Brown, who is an American social work researcher. And what I now want to move on to, we talked about emotions as what gets in the way. And the other element I want to just touch on is blame. And the context for that is I see many complaints that unfortunately is about, rather than looking to reflect and to work through the emotion, people need someone to blame. And very often it can be the healthcare professionals, the GP, the ambulance service. Delays must be the reason for this happening, and people are looking to blame. So just a short video here. I'm just going to share this. Hopefully we're fine for sound.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brene. I'm a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this is a couple years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house, I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And the first, a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: damn you, Steve. Who is my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back like at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought. Ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore, and so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all, like dial tone. Because he knows. How many of you go to that place when something bad happens, the first thing you want to know is whose fault is it? I'd rather it be my fault than no one's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is.
So I thought that there's so much in that, and just that quote from the video, blame is the discharging of discomfort and pain and has an inverse relationship with accountability. Wow. And it's definitely something, well, anecdotally, that we are seeing more, I think, with complaints. And also within that, people are looking for somebody. There has to be somebody at fault. And we're finding with, for example, delays in treatments and assessments that complaints are often around that. And it can be really difficult to manage because it becomes highly emotive and highly challenging for those of us that are on the receiving end. So why do people blame? What's the reason for it? And again, the literature suggests that yes, we need an explanation. It can't be it just happens. If you think about some awful cancer where people deteriorate really quickly, there must be a reason. That can't just have happened. And it can become an attack, whether that's conscious or unconscious. It can be a defense mechanism. Some would say it's an easy way to get out of if we blame rather than we look to ourselves, or we reflect or work through that emotion. And it may be an excuse as well to behave in a certain way. So fascinating work on blame. And how then might we respond when we're involved in seeing the blame? Again, it goes back to thinking about what the triggers may be. We can reframe and recognise that mistakes will happen, particularly in healthcare. The human errors will happen because we are humans and we will make mistakes. We'll find workarounds, and I'm not going to attempt to mention, but there's so much there around human factors we can look at. But with even the best process in the world, mistakes will happen. We can also look at perspective, and really often you're looking at what is real and what is imagined, and you will have two versions of the same story with a complaint, and hence why we need to investigate, but we may never get to the actual truth unless it's a video that's been taken of a situation. And I think my introduction mentioned apology, and when I started looking at this work, I think when we respond in a way that demonstrates empathy, when people are able to take responsibility, and apology is one way to do that, because it allows people to connect. If I can say, Michael, I'm so sorry that was your experience, that must have been really difficult. What is it we can do now for you? Then it shows I'm listening, it shows that I have got that connection. Again, it's not always easy to do that, and I would suggest that in order to apologise, and again, we could have a whole day on this, but just so you can take away with you what I believe are the main elements of a really good, meaningful apology, include all of this here, and you could have fun looking at videos. I was on a webinar yesterday, and we were talking about all the current politics, and just observing the number of politicians that are able to give a meaningful, sincere apology. Not very many. It needs to be sincere, and it needs to, I would suggest, include all of these elements. And if there has been a wrongdoing, we need to be specific. We should be saying that. We need to take that responsibility and accountability, and we really need to recognise the impact. Gosh, Michael, as a result of this error or this delay, I can see that your health's deteriorated. And we really need to agree actions and make sure that they're carried out. It's such a shame when complaints come to a head when a lot of the work a lot of good work has been done, but the final actions have not been carried out. So it's about ensuring that the complaint is valued and that it is followed through. Another tool around the 5 A's, around generally how we may respond, is around acceptance of people's experiences. As I said, you may have a reality, you may have their reality, but at the heart of it is what they believe to be true. And we spend a lot of time arguing and defending it rather than just saying, do you know, Michael, I'm really sorry, that was your experience, not if or it might have been, because that is what Michael believes happened. And we can then work with that. The apology, the actions, and all of this framed in an appreciative framework. Thank you, Michael, for bringing your feedback to me. It's really important that from your feedback we can really make improvements, and it has to be done in a sincere, meaningful way. So I just wanted to end literally the last few minutes to think about the kind of so what of all of this, and recognising that in order for you to for your heart and mind to be in the right place for complaints, you also have to be caring for yourselves. And I still love this metaphor of the plane safety brief, remembering to put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. And it's even more important, I would suggest, currently as we recover from COVID. Kristen Neff's work, she originally did her research, and there's been a lot of interest since then. The 3 elements of self-compassion are common humanity, self-kindness and mindfulness or presence. And it can be really helpful to recognise that we are all human. We need to be kind to ourselves, support and accept when we make mistakes, and see those mistakes as an opportunity for improvement. And in order to do that, we need to be present, we need to notice, we need to give ourselves space to reflect and understand that context. And there's a number of myths around self-compassion, and a lot of it is around recognising like the amazing Ronan Keating song, life is a roller coaster. You know, we all have to face adversity. It's part of our life experience, but it's what we do with that that matters. So people that are self-compassionate, we know from the research, they're also compassionate to others. Their health and well-being is better. They take responsibility for their mistakes. All of that supports them to reach their full potential. And if you're interested, Kristen Neff's got a great website and books and TED Talks, etc. One of her key definitions that I absolutely love and endorse is that in order to be self-compassionate, we should treat ourselves like a good friend, rather than, you know, a critical friend. It's about being a good friend and saying, if you make a mistake, saying to yourself what a good friend would say, you know, it's okay, Michael, you know, you made a mistake, but hey ho, let's see how we're going to address this. And we can be our own worst enemies. So let's invite compassion into the conversations. Let's show our shared humanity perhaps more often with complaints. Let's have less corporate and more human responses. Let's meet with people at the earliest opportunity so that complaints will not escalate, because I really believe that there's so much we can do at those early stages. So what's the emphasis here on learning? This is within a learning and improvement lens, of course. So my kind of summary of all of this, I think, would be if we can truly embrace feedback in all its formats, you know, we can learn a lot from compliments. We can learn a lot from what we do well. You know, why do patients and clients and relatives, what is it about what we do well that we could do more often? But certainly complaints are an opportunity to listen and learn and feedback and improve. People generally complain, certainly about the NHS, because they care about it. They want to see change. They don't want the same things to happen to others. So that is their motivation. And sometimes I think we forget that because we get kind of caught on a defensive roller coaster. As I said, I think we need to recognise the emotions and the blame as a barrier to resolution, not only from those people that are complaining, but also for ourselves and our teams as leaders. All of you can play into this. As I said, we should be seeking the earliest resolution. Very happy if you could put SPSO and colleagues that work in complaints out of a job. If we could nip things in the bud at the very earliest opportunity by engaging in conversations, by having the skills and confidence to say to those people that we maybe can see are upset or angry, or who come and speak to us, you know, Michael, what can I do now to help you with this? What would you like to see happen? What could we improve on? And I guess my final point is about, you know, really seeing the humanity in all of this. Very often people are not looking for lots of content, detail, jargon. What they're looking for is a human and compassionate response. So just my final couple of slides to say there's a few references there. I've mentioned conversational intelligence, mindful self-compassion, Willa Baker's work and Paul Gilbert, all of which are very readable and I'm sure you would enjoy. Finally, if you want to know more, I've been thrilled to be working with the Royal College of Physicians. We're running a number of programmes around this arena, challenging behaviours, complaints, and also responding and wellbeing. And you can find more information on my website here. There's some resources there, as well as I'd be very happy if anyone wants to get in touch, and you'll also find me on Twitter. So thank you. Now let me just stop sharing. There we go. Thank you. Bang on time, Michael. How's that? 15:39.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much. So it was great to be reminded of those insights you have, and using those insights to take the opportunities as much as possible to grasp that opportunity to learn from the challenge of complaints or concerns or errors. And the thing that came through to me loud and clear there was the importance of just pausing taking time to just think carefully, to acknowledge and understand. And I love that Viktor Frankl quote, actually. I used it last week on my younger brother, who takes great pride in his assertive demonstration of his opinions. And I encourage them just to take a bit of time sometimes to think about what he wants to say before he says it. So yeah, a lot of really, really useful stuff there. And it's generated an awful lot of questions. So we'll get to those in a minute. But I'm going to introduce Jeanette, actually, Jeanette is the Head of Patient Experience in NHS Lothian. And she's our guest questioner for today, and she has a question for you. So over to you, Jeanette.
Michael, thank you. And Dorothy, thank you so much for giving us so much to think about. I'm all for less corporate and more human responses. I think that is fantastic advice. And as for meeting patients and families at the earliest opportunities, I think we need to do more of that, because actually it's just the right thing to do. So again, thank you for giving us that challenge. My question for you today is we, and you've touched on this already, we recognise that lots of people and clinicians are named in complaints, and very much, you know, recognising how stressful and challenging and difficult that can be for the individual. How can we better support those people that are named in complaints, acknowledging the length of time a complaint can take from start to finish through to conclusion? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a great question. I think it is so important that staff involved, whether they're named or even whether they're being involved in a complaint, are supported. I was at one of the first in-person conferences on Monday at the ICC. It was about regulation, but there was a video around the impact. It was around fitness to practice, but it could just have as easily been a complaint. And it was reminding me of the absolute devastation that some staff can have when they are either the subject of a complaint or reported safe for fitness to practice, etc. So I think it must be part of the process. And I know absolutely how difficult it is for us to find time to support colleagues, but I think we have to ensure that colleagues who are involved in a complaint are given that opportunity to have time out to speak to a peer, probably may not always be appropriate with a manager, but someone that they can offload to, and also that they're continually updated about the complaint. Again, I'm so aware of the time factors, and I've heard from doctor colleagues about a complaint sitting, like literally feeling that it was sitting on their shoulder for years. And again, we know from the evidence that that has a devastating impact on healthcare professionals' health and well-being. You know, suicide rates are still very high amongst doctors. And we know from some specific scenarios that that has often been impacted through complaints or fitness to practice issues. So I'm not sure of the how you do it, Jeanette. I know it's not easy, but I think everyone within this arena has a responsibility to support those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy, and thanks for your question, Jeanette. So as I said, Dorothy, the Q&A has been very active, with at the minute a total of 25 published questions. So we'll use whatever time we have to try and get through some of those. The one that's been voted most is an interesting one, and as a registered nurse I can absolutely relate to it. So the question is, someone has posted it anonymously, so I don't know who's posted this question, but what can we do when personalities which trigger fight or flight are supported to thrive at the very top of our organisations?
Oh, wow. So thanks for that easy question. So when it's about leaders that are behaving in that way, basically, that sounds like. Well, I guess one of my responses to that was that they probably need some compassion as well. And that can be really hard. But there's another quote that stuck with me is hurt people. And it can be really difficult, particularly if there's a hierarchy there, if there's a power imbalance, to sort of call it out. And even saying call it out sounds, you know, it sounds quite combative, doesn't it? So, you know, even if you were, if it's around someone quite senior, could that person ask them if they're okay, or or be able to have some sort of conversation that helps them see the impact of their behaviour. Because I do believe that some leaders, often people who are very extrovert as well, might behave in those ways, and they don't actually understand, or they're not aware of that. So I think within teams, it would be looking at the culture and seeing if there's other mechanisms that can really enable any staff member to raise that concern and to share that with them, but in a, you know, if possible, in a kind, compassionate way. I think very often it can become almost a culture of what's the word? You know, there's a great TED talk about backstabbing, actually, similarly, where somebody struggling to hear, where rather than manage it or deal with it or confront it, it just becomes more and more gossipy, and it just makes the culture even worse. So that would be my answer to that, to try and show them the kindness and compassion that you would show to others.
Yeah, it's making me think, Dorothy, again about the advice you had about sort of pausing and noticing, and
yes,
and sometimes and holding to account, but sometimes holding people to account takes a bit of experience and maybe even sometimes a bit of training. And I often wonder, when people are angry or upset, trying to find out what's important to that individual, what is significant for them, to try and better understand it. Yeah. Excellent. I think there are some issues for some people on the call with sound, but some people seem to be saying that it's okay, and others are having some difficulties. So we'll crack on. We'll see what we can do to try and sort the sound. But the next question that I have for you, Dorothy, is a question from Fiona Campbell. And she says, thank you so much for this fascinating presentation. Dorothy, I'm intrigued by the strong links between civility in teams and the likelihood and chances of errors. There's strong culture change required to support improved patient safety. How do we support and measure culture to ensure it allows registrants to function at optimal level? Another tough question.
I know, and I'm really fascinated with the incivility work, and I know we know we've got some real experts in the UK around that work. So I think this actually came up on Monday as well, with the Cabinet Secretary talking about culture, and because a lot of it is more intangible, you know, how do we really measure and assess that? How do we look at the relationships? I mean, I think we all know when it's good. I think we all know when it's working well. I mean, I've worked in some amazingly strong teams, and part of my clinical experience was in intensive care, and you know, we had a great team working, but we also know when it's not right. But actually to hone in on what is about that team that allows people to be incivil to each other, and what can we do about it, is a much more difficult question. I do think there are some, and I'm not sure, I can't give you the references, but I do think there are some measurement tools that look at team culture. It is something I've seen in the past, so it might be, you know, maybe something that the QI Connect team could look at, or maybe within the iHub, for example. So I think there are measures out there, but I would agree it's very difficult, but it's also crucial, because we know, as I'm sure the questioner knows, that incivility has major impact not only on team dynamics but on patient mortality.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dorothy. So this, what I'm about to say here, is probably less of a question, more of a comment and a statement, and I wonder if insights you might have. So if organisations were more compassionate and culture was more nurturing, individuals may be more able to soothe and be more compassionate. This feels like the focus has very much been put on the individual, which is okay in terms of helping. But if we are in constant high alert due to the culture of organisations, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it is about, if there's individual responsibility and accountability, then that will start to make the small steps. I mean, I've heard, for example, with in some in one of hospitals I've worked in, where within their huddle, their very short huddle in the morning, it's a question of, you know, how is everybody today? And so there are small steps within teams, I think, that we can take. I think when you start to try and look at that in the bigger picture in terms of a compassionate organisation, it's more difficult. Again, it feels like it's more intangible. But I guess, as I said before, as leaders, we can all do. There are some things that are in our gift, and if we can start by modelling that compassion to those people that we work with, then, you know, hopefully it may have a sort of tipping effect.
Excellent. Somebody's saying here, Dorothy, amazing presentation, absolutely perfect timing. So there's some appreciation for the session today, which is fab.
Thank you.
We have another question. This was pre-submitted. We don't have the name of the person who submitted the question. I wonder what you'll have to say about this question. Where are the areas where this is worse? And what are your thoughts on why our systems are still finding it difficult transitioning to learning improvement from errors and complaints?
Yeah, gosh.
Probably
do you know, one of the things, yeah, I mean, I honestly, I couldn't answer that. I honestly don't know. What I do know, though, is that we're not good at sharing across Scotland. And it came up, and Jeanette may remember, a number of years ago, I did some work with Furness around learning and improvement, and we looked at good practice and we looked at models. But I think maybe because it's still contentious, or we have, you know, there's obviously reports, quarterly reports that go in, but in terms of some of that learning, I don't think it's shared as well as it could be across Scotland, never mind the UK. And particularly around what is working well, that would maybe support, for example, smaller boards with that work. But again, over the years, it's not improved massively. I think in terms of a learning loop, the learning from complaints probably still tends to be the weakest part. You know, we respond, we investigate, we respond, and we maybe carry out the recommendations, but the same things can often keep happening. And I think that learning, the gap in that learning loop is still something that could definitely be improved.
And in actual fact, we're involved an awful lot around at the moment around learning systems and human learning systems and learning healthcare systems. So it's a very topical issue at the moment, and maybe the topic of a future QI Connect session. So kind of watch this space, because I think it is very important. Okay, I think this might be the last question, Dorothy, just thinking about timing, and it was one that struck me when I read it, actually, so I'm going to take Chair's prerogative to ask it, if that's okay. So you talked about the gift of a complaint to learn and improve, and this question says, how can a complaint be seen as a gift when life-changing things have occurred or a loved one has died due to incompetent decisions being made? And the person also says, did I hear you, Dorothy, talk about the power of sorry in Stirling recently? So, but it's about you seeing it as a gift, and obviously something very significant has happened.
Yeah, yeah. You know, again, I think it's a really important question, and I think if people are, if they're raising that complaint and it has had a significant impact, if people are raw and they're hurting and they're sitting with blame, sometimes as well we see complainants who are unable to forgive, even when people have apologised or boards have said, you know, we absolutely got it wrong, we've made a mistake. And you know, you see some really heartfelt, sincere apologies from clinicians and from boards. And it may be a step too far for some people to see it as a gift if they've had those significant that significant impact. And I guess that was why we started in our title, Michael, around hearts and minds, because again, there's some really lovely literature around if we're unable to see it, if we see it as a threat, if we see it as a completely devastating negative event in our lives, then we can't move on. And that will sit with those individuals, and that will have an impact on their future and their well-being. So being able to, whether it's forgive or move on or learn or reflect, I think can be an important part of the process, but I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do either. I think people can sit with a lot of hurt.
Absolutely. Dorothy, thank you so much for once again for taking time to join us today and for your insights. It's generated some lots of curiosity and lots of questions, and hopefully people are taking away some useful insights and tools to help them in future. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
And I'll move on and finish the session so that everyone can get to their 4 p.m. meetings. So just to say that our next session will be Thursday, the 8th of December at our usual time of 3 p.m. And that is with Kedar Mate, who's the President and Chief Executive Officer at the Institute of Healthcare Improvement. And that looks to be another fascinating session, looking at the challenges we are all facing at the moment within health and care around very, very pressured systems and teams and individuals who have worked very hard over the past few years and through very, very stressful and difficult times. So that looks like it's going to be a great session in December, and we hope that you can join us then. And just a reminder, today's session has been recorded, will be made available with all of the other sessions that have been recorded made available in our back catalogue. So please refer to our website, the details are there, and you can check out the recordings on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much to all of you who have joined us today, to the backroom production team who make sure that this runs smoothly, and especially to Jeanette and Dorothy for giving up their time today for a fascinating session. Thank you all once again.